Fool me, we can't get fooled again.
I got a question here from a viewer. They signed their name, Hi There. And so here's their question. Hey, David Gray, what are your thoughts on Divine Nine Greek letter organizations? Do they go against the church? Signed, Hi There. So Hi There is asking about what Divine Nine is. It is a family of Greek letter fraternities and sororities that are predominantly Black. So they're Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, Iota, Iota something, Kappa Alpha Psi, Sigma Gamma Rho, Phi Beta Sigma, Alpha Phi Alpha, Omega Psi Phi, and Alpha Kappa Alpha. So 4 sororities and 4 fraternities, and five fraternities and 4 sororities that call themselves the Divine Nine. They're like a family of predominantly Black fraternities and sororities. The oldest one would be Alpha Phi Alpha, which was founded in 1906. And then the oldest sorority would be Alpha Kappa Alpha. Can't recall the year actually. So, but I want to answer this question really in a context. We could. I don't think there's anything but unique about predominantly Black fraternities and sororities than predominantly white or predominantly Asian or predominantly whatever fraternities and sororities. So we can really look at this question in a context. What does the church teach about? Can a Catholic belong to Greek letter fraternities and sororities? Is there something in them that go against what the Catholic Church is saying? And so I think really the best way to really answer this question is in the context of what does the church teach about Freemasonry? We know that in 1738, the Catholic Church prohibited Catholics from belonging to any sort of Masonic organizations. In 1948, I want to say, the Catholic Church prohibited Catholics from belonging to any Communist Party organization. So, yes, the Catholic Church does prohibit her members from belonging to organizations that inveigh against the Catholic Church. So the best way to answer this question, can a Catholic belong to a Greek letter organization, is to look at it. Does any of these organizations fit within that criteria of what the Catholic Church would say is these organizations, they have philosophies, they have ideologies that are incompatible with Catholicism, and therefore their members are prohibited. One thing I will say, and we'll talk about this in a moment when we get to the 1983 canon law, was that since post-Vatican II, I forget the name of the document, but post-Vatican II, bishops have been able to interpret canon law according to their own purview. You know, how do they interpret canon law? And so, we have seen some bishops take the canon 1983 canon law and where it applies to secret organizations, and they've applied it broadly. Like we had a bishop, I think in the 1990s, late 1990s, out of Kansas, that he prohibited his members from even belonging to the Society of St. Pius X. Based upon, he was saying that it's an organization that plots against the Catholic Church. So I'm just going to, so of course I have no authority whatsoever to say, you know, whether you can or cannot belong to a Greek letter organization, but I'm just going to look at the construct here. And this doesn't have to say anything where there may be a bishop that comes along that says something different than I'm about to say, right? Because he does have authority to say that. But I'm going to just lay out the criteria and see here. Amathoria says, yeah, my college, my biochemistry lab partner was an AKA. Yeah. In college, I exclusively dated AKAs. AKAs were my thing. In fact, the woman who I married in college, she told me she was going to become an AKA, but she became a Sigma Gamma Rho. Right? She tricked me, and so but yeah, I used to love AKAs when I was a boy. But so let's take a look here, and and as a disclaimer, I'll put this disclaimer out there. When I was a young man, I did pledge a fraternity. It was Omega Psi Phi. It is part of that Divine Nine. So I put that disclaimer out there, but I'll try not to be biased with my answer here, because I think what I'm about to say, I think is the would fit what I think the church is trying to teach. So here's what Pope Clement the 16th said concerning Freemasonry, right? He said, he looked at Freemasonry in 1738, and Freemasonry, as we know it today in its current form, started in 1717. And so it became an issue moving forward after that. And by 1738, it had risen up to his attention. And despite people close to him, including his nephew, not wanting him to issue this papal bull, he issued it anyway. Um, and what he found in Freemasonry, and by this time in 1738, there had been a lot of exposés about Freemasonry. Their ritual was pretty public, all 3 degrees, and their constitution was also a public document. So he's looking at this, and he's hearing from a lot of people in the Catholic Church about this issue. And what he's saying, he found really 4 points. One, he said Freemasonry is an error and a vice, a danger, and a disturbance to the Catholic Church. Being such, the Orthodox religion needs to be kept free from it, lest Freemasonry breaks into the household of God like thieves and like foxes seeking to destroy the vineyard. And then his theological issue based upon that was that Freemasonry, he says, caters to indifferentism, right? It's the idea of natural virtue, that you can just make yourself a better man through study of working tools. It has its own moral law. It obligates its members on an oath and a Bible and a host of grievous punishments and silence about what they do in secret. And being that the meetings of Freemasonry take place in secrecy, they lack transparency, cause rumors. Due to this, the faithful have great suspicions about it. Societies like these disturb the peace and temporal state of well-being of soul. So then we ask the question, does Greek letter fraternities and sororities, do they fit within this criteria of what Pope Clement the 12th was saying? All right. So, and this is just speaking broadly, right? Um, I would say, based upon what I've seen of fraternity and sorority rituals, and I would say I would say 5 of them. I've seen a ritual of Delta Sigma Theta. I've seen a ritual of Alpha Kappa Alpha. I've seen a ritual of Sigma Gamma Rho. I've seen a ritual of Alpha Phi Alpha, and I've seen a ritual of course, Omega Psi Phi. Right. And what I've seen with at least those is not what I saw with Freemasonry. Is that Freemasonry, Pope Clement the 12th is saying here, is that it was established on indifferentism, which means Freemasonry is teaching that what it believes, its philosophy, its ideology is true, and that it is it's an alternative truth. And both, so therefore, Catholicism and Freemasonry cannot be true, because Freemasonry is saying if you live your life this way, you'll achieve this, you'll merit this sort of afterlife. Catholicism is saying, well, if you obey our teachings, well, you'll be a saint. And so these are 2 really divergent paths that cannot be mutually true. Freemasonry is saying that you don't need God and His grace. The Catholic Church is saying that you do need God and His grace. So both of those things cannot be true. So we really don't. I have not seen that myself with any Greek letter organizations. There could be some out there that does teach some sort of moral law, some sort of philosophy that is antithetical to what the church is teaching. That's a possibility. There may be. And that's a really good point, because I don't think this is like something that you can apply across the board to all Greek letter organizations, fraternities, and sororities, whether they're predominantly black or predominantly white. I just think they're all different. They're not like Freemasonry. Freemasonry is Freemasonry all across the world, whether whatever set it is, whether it's even predominantly women or predominantly some sort of ethnicity or whatever. It's all the same. It's the same philosophy. It's the same 3 degrees with minor variations. You don't get that with the Greek letter fraternities and sororities. They all have their own rituals. So we have to really look at them one by one. But yeah, based upon my experience, I wouldn't say that the rituals I've seen in those 5 fraternities and sororities, that they have their own philosophy that's setting their members on a different path that's just like incompatible with Catholicism, right? I haven't seen that they have their own moral law either. What I did see was that they all have their own virtues. Okay. Like in Omega Psi Phi, it would be manhood, scholarship, and perseverance. It would be the defense of women. Omega Psi Phi teaches, says in this ritual that it's a Christian brotherhood. It teaches biblical principles. And that was unique, I think, of every other fraternity that I saw. I didn't see that it was something like Alpha Phi Alpha. I didn't see in a ritual like biblical principles, biblical stories. Okay. Um, for example, Alpha Kappa Alpha in their ritual, they teach things about fidelity and love and obedience. These are some of their cardinal principles that are really some of the same things that that we see with the church teaches about virtue. So it's not anything that's I would say there though that I would say in all those rituals that are teaching these principles, they are not saying that you need God and His grace to be lifted up in these principles. So we can say, oh, there may be some issue there, right? That that may be something that may be familiar to what we saw with Freemasonry. Freemasonry is also teaching fortitude, temperance, prudence, and justice as cardinal virtues, and are saying that you can improve in these virtues by just studying the working tools of Freemason. So, and so that may be a critique that we can offer the Greek letter fraternities and sororities. A critique there that we can offer the Greek letter fraternities and sororities, that they're saying that they're not saying that you can that you need God and His grace to grow in the virtues. So and Kevin comes in. Kevin has loved those AKAs. He says, "I really wish Black letter Greek organizations would be to the Black community like the Knights of Columbus did for the Catholics." Yeah, absolutely. So let's take another look here and compare and contrast. So Pope Clement was saying here in the ban against Freemasonry was that another issue was that the Freemasons were meeting in private; they were meeting in secret. And we have to look at that in conjunction with what he says next. And he says, due to this, the faithful have great suspicions about it. Okay. So I would say all fraternities and sororities, even I would say even some meetings of, say, the Knights of Columbus are private meetings. Okay. And so I think even sometimes priests would meet in private, right? The Pope has private meetings. Okay. So private meetings isn't necessarily the issue. One is what it was the second part of it, where he says out of those private meetings were causing great suspicions. Because what was happening with Freemasonry was that, well, it was an English export. It was coming out of a country that didn't have, it was being ruled by the people. And the suspicions that people were having was that, oh, they're trying to export parliamentary rule to these Spain and to Portugal and to Italy, where we do have a king, we do have a monarch. and they're using these Masonic lodge meetings to stir revolutions. And they were absolutely right. By the time we get to 1848, the Freemasons do stir revolutions throughout Europe, right? And eventually, the monarchy falls. And when the monarchy falls, comes the state, what's called the state, and the state is able to be used by the Freemasons to attack the church, right? Because they push this idea of separation of church and state. So people were suspicious about these so-called Masons meeting in secret, and they weren't talking about any sort of building, masonry. So that was the issue there. So we have to look at that in historical context. So I would say, even though Greek letter organizations meet in secret, it's not. No one's really suspicious about what Sigma Gamma Rho is meeting about, right? Or Phi Theta, what they're meeting about, or what are they discussing. Nobody's really. It's not causing great suspicion and concern throughout the country. And so 4 is also nullified because 4 goes to 3. Societies like these disturb the peace of the temporal soul and the well-being of souls. So far, I don't think, based upon what Pope Clement XII was saying, I don't think we can say, even again, every Greek letter sorority and fraternity have their own rituals. We have to look at each of them individually to see what they're teaching, what they're obligating their members to. Is it antithetical to what the church is teaching? We have to look at their obligations. We have to say, is there any sort of punishments or conditions of these obligations that are anti-Christian? Like, if you're taking an obligation like the Freemasons, like, oh, if I violate this obligation, cut my throat, take my bowels out, throw them to the ashes, burn them up. Is there anything like that, an obligation that's just is a sin if it's carried out? If it is, then that's definitely problematic. But then let's take a look at the second thing here. Let's take a look at the Code of Canon Law, the new Code of Canon Laws for the Roman Church, the Roman Liturgical Church from 1883, and from the Eastern liturgical churches from 1990. Let's see. Kevin says, we alphas got to be the most worst, the alpha ape to Sphinx Club to alpha man. So we're going from ape to man. That's Darwinism. Okay, that's something I don't know if I paid attention to that in the alpha in the ritual. That's interesting. That's interesting right there. So Kevin is saying in the Alpha Phi Alpha ritual, there's some sort of Darwinism, right? So, and I would say this. I mean, of all the rituals I've seen, people always talk about, like, was any of the Greek letters, especially the Divine Nine fraternity sororities, were they influenced by the Freemasons? Which is always interesting, an interesting question, because we never really know for sure which founders were like Freemasons for certain, right? But when you look at rituals like Alpha Phi Alpha and Omega Psi Phi, one of those, obviously, Omega Psi Phi, I went through after I had become a Freemason, and there were, I felt like a lot of similarities. But I would say, Kevin may agree with this, that definitely Alpha Phi Alpha clearly has the most Masonic overtones of them all, right? As far as the knocks on the door, as far as just the language. So definitely, I would say influence by Freemasonry. But also, there's some things in there like being blindfolded, being walked around. These are things that we see in a lot of initiation rites, right? But if any fraternity was definitely started by Freemasons, it would definitely have been Alpha Phi Alpha. And, of course, we know for sure some of the members were, but we don't know how influential they were in the ritual. But yeah, a lot of overtones there. But let's take a look at the code of canon law and see if we can answer this question another way. Like, what does the church teach about Greek letter fraternities and sororities? Do they go against the Catholic Church? Well, the code of canon law, it 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 sort of gets to that question broadly, right? It says that a person who joins an association which plot against the church is to be punished with a just penalty. However, a person who promotes or directs an association of this kind is to be punished with an interdict. So, and let's go ahead and read the one for the Eastern churches as well. It says a person who uses a public performance or talk or publicly disseminated writing or other media or communication to blaspheme, seriously harm good morals, injure religion or the church, or to incite hatred or contempt for religion or the church is to be punished with an appropriate penalty. One who joins an association which plots against the church is to be punished with an appropriate penalty. Okay, so and as I said, we've had at least one bishop in Kansas in the 1990s who looked at Canon Law 1374 and said, "Hey, this applies to the SSPX. It applies to Planned Parenthood. It applies, of course, to the Freemasons. And if you belong to, he had a bunch of organizations, all the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Freemasons, the Demo Lay, the Rainbow Girls." And he was saying, well, if you belong to any of these organizations, you are excommunicated. So again, bishops can apply this broadly. All right. So I'm not going to say it applies to Greek letter fraternities or not. That's I would say that's the job of a bishop. But let's look here and see what the criteria probably should be. So does any Greek letter organizations plot against the church? Does any Greek letter organizations promote um, seriously harm good morals? Do they injure the religion of the church? Do they incite hatred or contempt for religion or the church? Those are just questions I think just applies to each probably individual case, right? Each individual case. I don't know for sure. I would say of any Greek letter organization that I know of that has plotted against the church in a way that we know that lodges of Freemasons have, and that we know that the Communist Party has, Planned Parenthood has, the Democratic Party has, right? Um, so, so yeah, that's just one of those individual cases. I think we just have to look at, on a case by case. So, so I would say overall, just to get back to the original question from the questioner named Hi There. I would say I don't know. Right? I would say I don't know. I would say I don't know. I would not be able to say broadly. Right? I don't think we could apply a blanket statement to all Greek letter fraternities and sororities, but we have to look at them in individual cases. And I would say probably in each of their rituals, I think we could probably find something problematic. Like like Kevin said, the idea in Alpha Phi Alpha of going from an ape to a phoenix or something like that. That's Darwinism. That may be problematic there, right? Or once we get to like Delta Sigma Theta, they have a very high emphasis on the Greek goddess Minerva, right? That may be borderline cultish, right? At least in a ritual. Now, if you talk to like any Delta Sigma Theta and you say the word Minerva, she's not going to know what you're talking about unless she was just initiated. But it's not something that's part of their regular milieu of just how they speak, right? It's just, but it is in their ritual, like a lot of things about the goddess Minerva. So I think we could probably find something problematic in each one. And then, a lot of people, I notice a lot of people would say, well, what about how, like like members of Omega Sci-Fi, how the Q dogs, how they act in public, right? They say that they're supposed to be for the defense of women, but do we really see that? Do we see a lot of womanizing? I think that's a different question, right? I mean, there's what the organization teaches, and then there's what the organization tolerates, and then there's what the organization, and then there's what just individual members do. Okay, so there is a culture there that is concerning, but there's a lot of things about every culture that's concerning, and that's where and that's why being a Catholic is a much higher calling than belonging to the Catholic culture and belonging to and pursuing the divine nature, participating in the divine nature is just a higher call than anything we can do on earth. Any organization we could belong to on earth is just well beneath that. Even like Italian cultures or Black cultures or Greek cultures, it's just far beneath the culture of the Catholic Church and participating in the divine nature. Okay, so ultimately, the broader question is like, do we need Greek letter organizations? Like, should we belong to them or not? I would say we don't need them as Catholics. I would say it's even as much good as they do in society, helping people doing this and that. Ultimately, it's just a much lower calling than pursuing sainthood. So we just have to pick and choose, what do we want to do? How do we want to help people in society? I would say if there's an organization in the church that a person wants to work through to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to visit those in prison, I would say seek that. Um, but if there's also organizations that you find some mutual interest in, that does not somehow impair your faith, does not drag you down, that is not in any way incompatible, then I'd say that may be an opportunity as well. But no, we don't need Greek organizations and for fraternities and sororities in any way whatsoever as being Catholics. They're just a much lower calling, and we can do without them as Catholics. So that's what I would say about that. And I hope I answered your question in that regard. Kevin says, I can say that we men of Alpha Phi Alpha do not plot against the church, but that the college frat lifestyle will send you straight to hell. Yeah, I would probably also say that about Omega Sci-Fi as well. There's nothing, I don't think, plots against the Catholic Church, but yeah, that young boy lifestyle that some older men still engage in, yeah, it's not it's not where you want to be. Brandon says Minerva was a restaurant in Rapid City. That's interesting. That's interesting. The Greek goddess Minerva. All right, so that's today's show. Hope you guys have a blessed weekend. Have a blessed Veterans Day. If you know a veteran, thank them for their service. And all you guys and gals out there, like Kevin, KP Jack, knows a veteran, and Brianna, who participates in the life of the military service. I definitely appreciate all what you do. And thank you for your service. And I will see you guys next week, hopefully with a mass nightmare. And I think when you see me next week as well, there won't be much of an echo in here. I think I'll finally have some furniture in here. And you guys are going to see the wonderful hutch or cabinet that Brianna gifted me. And you're going to see that right behind me. And yeah, look forward to that. And God bless you all, my friends. Thanks for being my friends. And I will see you on the next time. God bless.